Hi everybody, my name is Mike. This is my YouTube page, Mox News. Thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you're finding something of value here. I truly do. I just want to take a second to apologize for this guy that's coming up here being on your computer because he's total douchebag who does not believe in freedom. He's a drug war profiteer. He says, "Oh, the big pharma companies aren't funding our operation." That's a lie. And besides, there's plenty of other people to fund his operation. And that's the whole point of this guy. What he's doing is that he sees a niche where he can make money by tapping into these people that have been brainwashed for generations on the propaganda that marijuana is somehow hurting people. Okay? Alcohol destroys life every day. Do you see him going after alcohol? The big pharma companies, these pills they give you, there's a list of side effects. A giant list of side effects. And when you hear them rattle them off on television commercials, may induce diarrhea, suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Okay? This big pharma is incredibly dangerous. Cannabis is probably the safest drug there is. Safer than water. Water kills a lot of people. Cannabis doesn't do that. So, let's just be clear. This guy is a drug war profiteer when he says, "Oh, we're not funded by Big Pharma." That doesn't mean that Big Pharma can't make donations to them, because if you go to their website, they have donate now to our cause. And Big Pharma can go, "Oh, here's $20,000. Or big petroleum, or big tobacco, or big alcohol, or big cotton, or a dozen other industries who are incredibly threatened. The prison industrial complex, the police state. This guy just sees a niche where he can go, "Ah, look, I can tap into this and I'll get funding from all these giant people." Okay, that's what's happening with the anti-freedom, anti-legalization, anti-normalization of cannabis. Okay, he says, "Oh, well, we want to study." He doesn't say that they're for medical marijuana. They want to have studies for the effects of medical cannabis to be able to, so they can get proper pharmaceuticals out of the drug. Well, you've had generations to do that, and you've chosen not to, okay? And we know cannabis helps save little babies' lives and give the lives back to people like MS patients and Alzheimer's patients and dementia patients and cancer patients and AIDS patients. You're just a complete douchebag. And I want to apologize real quick for the douchebag being on your computer. But you know what they say about keeping your friends close and keeping your enemies closer? It's important to know what the other side is saying so that you're ready to combat it. Okay? Because they are powerful. They are, and they are all about keeping you in chains, not giving you your freedom as an adult to decide what it is that you put into your body. They are saying, "Oh my God, they have gummy bears with THC in them." Okay, and they have brownies too. Oh my God, they are they're making brownies for generations and generations, 1,000 generations before this. Marijuana, cannabis, used as medicine. Now they say, "Oh, we want to see if there's actual medicinal qualities to it." Fuck you, no you don't. You want to baby step everything to say, "Oh, well, we found this flaw in this, so you can't have cannabis." Because big pharma, because big oil, because big tobacco, because big alcohol, because all the people that are poisoning you and our environment are threatened by the legalization of cannabis. Okay? I just want to make that point before this douchebag makes all his points. So, that being said, Mox News again, keeping your enemies closer, letting you know what the other side is saying. It's important to know what the douchebags on CNN, on Fox News, out of the Pentagon, out of the White House. It's important to know what all the douchebags are saying, even if you hate them. So thanks for tuning in. My name's Mike. This is my YouTube page. It survives solely on contributions from good people like you. It's easy to make a contribution. There's clickable links in the text body of the video right below this video, or you can go to moxnews.com, or I'll leave all the links so that you can see them on the screen. Okay, so thanks very much for tuning in and for your continued support. One of these days this drug war is going to end, okay? And it is going to be an awesome day, because completely failed drug war has a complete opposite effect of what it's intended to do. We have an opioid epidemic, 100% because of the drug war, okay? So one of these days this drug war is going to end. And it'd be awesome if Mox News could be there to celebrate that day with you. Mox News survives solely on contributions from good people like you. And that celebration is going to be one heck of a party. So please give back to Mox News. I give daily. And it'd be really nice if you'd give something back. Stay cool till that day.
Washington Journal continues.
We're back with Luke Niforatos, who is the Chief of Staff and Senior Policy Advisor for Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And Luke's here to talk about his group's effort to oppose the commercialization and normalization of marijuana. Luke, good morning.
Good morning, Jesse. How are you doing today?
I'm good. So first of all, explain to us what your group is and who's involved.
Yeah, so our organization is called Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM, and we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We were co-founded by Dr. Kevin Sabet, a former senior drug policy advisor to the Obama administration, as well as former Congressman Patrick Kennedy of the Kennedy family. And they came together about 6 years ago, very concerned after Colorado, where I'm from, and Washington legalized marijuana at the ballot. And they saw this as being the inception of the new big tobacco, that this marijuana industry was going to grow. They were going to turn out much more addictive products. They were going to target kids. They were going to do a lot of advertising and push for regulations that were self-serving and really cause a lot of harm to the public from a public health perspective. And unfortunately, now we're about 5 years into legalization in some of the states in this country. And we're seeing that this industry has turned into big tobacco and is now invested in by big tobacco. So, our organization is focused on the science side of this. We want science to lead the day. We do not want to bring back reefer madness. That's why we have some of the leading researchers on marijuana on our scientific advisory board. We're talking people from Harvard, Princeton, the University of Colorado, all doing the research today to find out what the harms are of marijuana. So our organization wants to reduce marijuana use. We see this as something that would be harmful in society, but we also want to prevent the commercialization of this drug, because what happens in this country when we allow a legal drug is we build huge businesses around this. It's, you think about big tobacco and you think about pharmaceutical companies and you think about alcohol. Those industries, you look at the opioid epidemic. We have hundreds of thousands of people every year in this country who are dying as a result of our commercial drug industries. Looking at marijuana, we're asking the American public, do you want another commercial drug industry layered onto the drug industries that we already have? So we do work at the federal level, working with policymakers to try to write policies that put public health first, not the profits. And at the state level, we work with state policymakers as well as the public to push back against these pushes to legalize. Now, let me be very clear. A lot of people think that this is a question between should we legalize marijuana or should we throw everybody in prison? We call that the false dichotomy. We reject reject that dichotomy. There are many options we have to reform marijuana laws, and many options that actually our organization pushes for. So, you know, we don't think anybody should go to jail if they've got a joint in their pocket. So we're pushing for decriminalization, which basically makes it more like a traffic ticket instead of going to jail on your first marijuana offense if you're possessing it. But we don't want to legalize production and sale of marijuana, because then you get big tobacco 2.0. So that's kind of where we draw the line there. On the medical front, we push for more research. We've signed on to bills in Congress to have more medical research done on the marijuana plant. We want to see that go through the scientific process. I think that's important as well. So it's very key that we understand, and we've done a lot of polling across the country. Most Americans, they just don't think that somebody should go to jail for having a joint, but none of them want a pot shop in their neighborhood, and none of them want kind of gummies and candies laced with very high potency marijuana being sold in communities across this country. So we think there's a lot of people that are concerned about this industry side of it. They're looking at states like Colorado and seeing the results aren't going so well, but they think that there's no other option. So our organization is really here to be a third option on the table. You don't have to just legalize this the whole way.
Okay. Well, we're going to get some of our callers involved in this conversation. We're going to open up special lines this morning. If you support legalizing marijuana, we want you to call in at 202-748-8000. If you oppose legalizing marijuana, we want you to call in at 202-748-8001. And keep in mind, we're always reading on social media, on Twitter at CSpanWJ, and on Facebook at facebook.com/CSpan. Now, Luke, your organization has lived through Colorado's move toward legalization. How has the legalization of marijuana affected Colorado specifically?
Yeah, so our organization's based in D.C., but I'm actually from Colorado, and I'm actually raising my 2-year-old daughter in the state with my lovely wife, who I think are both watching today, so hi everybody. The experience in Colorado has not been a good one. You look at every kind of promise was made when we legalized it as a state. They told us that this would be social justice. Well, the marijuana arrest rate for African Americans is twice that of what it is for whites in our state. We're still seeing arrest disparities with marijuana-related incarceration. So very much a concerning issue. It didn't solve our social justice issues in the state. You look at the schools. They said that legalization was going to bring all this money for our schools. Well, you ask our former governor, John Hickenlooper, who is now running for president, and he'll tell you, he says this, and I'll quote him verbatim, he said, "The money from marijuana is a drop in the bucket." So we're not getting the marijuana tax revenue. In fact, the highest percentage of a state budget in any marijuana state that has legalized marijuana is 0.78% of their state budget. So we're talking a very small number in terms of tax revenue. More people are dying on the roads in Colorado since legalization. We had a 151% increase in marijuana-impaired driving deaths on the roads because marijuana impairs your driving ability. So that's a concern. Youth use. Colorado is the #1 state in the country for first-time youth marijuana use for 2 years in a row. And that's according to the national surveys on drug use and health. They're the foremost credible survey on this subject. So you look at just about every indicator and it's not going well in Colorado. And I'll finally say this about my state. I love my state. It's beautiful. But we now have 3 different foreign countries' cartels that have set up shop with illegal pot grows in our state since legalization. So we haven't gotten rid of the black market. This regulatory infrastructure is not preventing this underground market from happening. So, you look at this policy on its merits and it's a failed policy. We have to look at better options, which is why our organization is advocating for, options like, alternatives to incarceration, more research, but not allowing this brand new industry, which, by the way, the pot industry in Colorado is making tons of money. Our state may not be, but the pot industry is making billions of dollars. And they just actually were able to successfully lobby for a whole laundry list of self-serving regulations. But I'll tell you that the biggest one they got was an exemption from the Colorado Clean Indoor Air Act. Yes, the Colorado Clean Indoor Air Act. They can now smoke pot in our restaurants, hotels, and lounges in the state of Colorado. They just signed that into law. So we are talking about kind of a big tobacco type industry that I just don't think the rest of the country wants to have.
Let's let Teresa, who's calling from Harvard, Massachusetts, join the conversation. Teresa, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Luke. This is Teresa. And one of the comments I wanted to make is that here in Massachusetts, which everyone knows it's legal here, 80% of our sales are the black. So it's very easy for young, especially, to obtain marijuana, and it's very cheap. And many are school, out of school, they're driving on the roads, thinking that it's no problem at all. And how do we get the message out there to the rest of the country that hasn't legalized marijuana yet, that it's very dangerous for young people, very harmful to the developing brain? They should absolutely not drive after using. It just doesn't seem like the message is getting out to the, even within our state, but especially outside of our state, that we're definitely seeing a lot of negative harmfulness to kids. And I just want.
Go ahead and respond, Luke.
Yeah, Teresa, thank you so much for your question. I've been in Massachusetts a lot over the last few months, and I echo your concerns. The fact of the matter is, science and public health are being put on the back burner on this topic. The people who are leading the conversation right now on the marijuana issue are marijuana industry professionals. These companies have billion-dollar ad budgets, and they're able to put up billboards in all these states saying, marijuana is no big deal. It's, no worse than alcohol. They're comparing it to other drugs and saying, it's harmless. And unfortunately, the message that sends to our youth, but also just the general public, is marijuana is no big deal. Marijuana is harmless. And the science tells us the opposite of that. The science tells us, and actually we just had a major study released by the Lancet Journal of Psychiatry, which is the foremost institution on marijuana's impact on the human brain. They found that this new marijuana of today, because the marijuana of today is 99% potency versus the marijuana of the Woodstock days, which was 3% potency. So we're talking about a whole different drug right now. They said that that drug is actually, the people who use it now are 5 times more likely to develop psychosis. You look at a lot of the research out there, it absolutely impairs your driving ability. Impairment on the roads is rapidly increasing in every state that legalized. And of course, this industry is, I mentioned it's like big tobacco. It's invested in by Marlboro and Philip Morris, and they're using the same tactics for advertising to kids. They have gummies, candies, ice cream, sodas, all laced with very high potency THC. So of course, our kids are getting into that in these states that have allowed this to propagate. So I share your concerns. I think science and public health need to lead this discussion for policy, not profits, because the only people who are going to make a bunch of money are Wall Street investors and Silicon Valley investors, probably not the rest of us.
Luke, in how many states is marijuana legal? How many states has marijuana been decriminalized? And how many states is it fully illegal?
Yep, so only about 9 states in the country have legalized marijuana for recreational use, all of them at the ballot, so the people have voted on that. In terms of decriminalization, I think there's about a dozen states in the country that have decriminalized it. In other words, made it like a traffic ticket for possession, but kept production and sale illegal. So most states in the country do not have legal marijuana. They maybe are looking at medical marijuana or decriminalization, but legalization of marijuana for commercial sale and production is still very much a small minority of this country. And over the last 3 years, only 2 states have legalized marijuana. So I think we're starting to see this momentum kind of go back the other direction, because it's been a bad few years for the marijuana industry.
Let's talk to Sharon, who's calling from Minnesota. Sharon, good morning.
Good morning, Jesse. Thanks for taking my call. I have 3 comments here. One, the last caller, she wanted to know about the young kids getting the message and, don't get in the car and drug and drive. But we want to think that the message of drinking and driving has actually been gotten. Really? Okay. Next comment. You say that you want to listen to the science. That's very hypocritical coming from a conservative, because you don't listen to science in any other aspect. Number 3, I want to know if you know who LEAP is. LEAP. It's Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And there are many of them out there. And I do want to make one more statement. I am 56 years old. And 30 years ago, I was diagnosed with an eye disease. And I live in Minnesota. I don't get the right to marijuana. But I was given this disease 30 years ago, and I am legally blind and almost completely blind at this time. However, I would have been completely blind 25 years ago had I not continued to smoke marijuana. And I'm going to continue to smoke marijuana. Thanks.
Go ahead and respond, Luke.
Hi, Sharon. Yeah, so we're actually a nonpartisan organization, and like I said, we were founded by a former Obama administration advisor and former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, a Democrat congressman and member of the Kennedy family. So, we're not looking to make this a partisan issue. In fact, this is a totally nonpartisan issue. We work with the NAACP, we work with the Hispanic caucuses, we work with the Black Caucus, we work with, folks on every kind of, part of the spectrum, politically speaking. We work with them all because at the end of the day, public health and the impact to our communities is not a partisan issue. That is a human issue. And we're all on the same side of this. And so I think, I respect your opinion. And I think that, if you found something that helps you, I want you to get what you need that helps you. But, what you were referring to is really more of a medical component of this drug, which we should look at, research. And I want to see the science really validate that to give you a highly regulated and good prescription drug for what you need. But that conversation is separate from the conversation of legalization of marijuana for recreational use, which is, I think, what the country's looking at. So it's important we distinguish medicinal values of this drug from recreational legalization. I think that's important.
Let's go to Heidi, who's calling for Hermosa Beach, California. Heidi, good morning.
Hey, good morning. So I voted for Prop 64 here in Los Angeles. And I'm just so upset by what's become of our state here since then. And for one of the reasons I'm going to focus on is the homeless issue. So Luke just said that cannabis can cause psychosis. It can also cause adult schizophrenia. And so if cannabis increases the risk for adult schizophrenia and schizophrenia increases the risk for homelessness, then can't we say that cannabis increases the risk for homelessness?
Go ahead and respond, Luke.
Heidi, thank you for your comment. We've seen homelessness increase in most of the states that have legalized marijuana. Here in Colorado, we've seen a triple-digit percentage increase in homelessness. My mom actually works for Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, largest nonprofit that's taking care of the homeless in this state, and they're overwhelmed. So absolutely, I think we're seeing a homeless issue. I don't know if we can draw the line directly between use of marijuana and homelessness, but we do know that in states that have legalized marijuana, they are seeing a significant rise. So we have to look at that. More research needs to be done. It's just another one of those failed promises of the industry that you legalize marijuana and you're basically going to pave your streets in gold with all the tax money. It's just not happening, and a lot of the social services, public services in these cities are struggling to keep up with the impact.
This is Washington, and so we're always concerned about the politics, and we were talking earlier about lobbying. Are you keeping track of the money going from the marijuana industry to politicians to lobby to get these new laws passed and get these regulations passed? And what are you finding out?
We sure are. That's a great question. So if you go to our website, learnaboutsam.org, learnaboutsam.org. We have a whole map of the United States. You can click on your state and you can see how much money the pot industry has given to your representatives, who gave it and when. We're trying to empower the public with this information so they can track their representatives and hold them accountable to the people that they're taking money from. So we're seeing the industry is pouring unprecedented amounts of money on the Hill in DC. A lot of money being put into this push to try to get access to the financial system, this push to try to legalize marijuana. They've hired some of the top lobbying firms on K Street to push their initiatives forward. We're just a small nonprofit. We're trying to kind of lobby in opposition to that. We can't keep up with big K Street lobbying firms, but even if we did, they are buying up most of them now. So we're seeing a big money power play, and a lot of that is because of the influence of Altria. Altria is, I think, the world's largest big tobacco company. It's a multinational big tobacco company. They have now made a $4 billion investment in the marijuana industry. They've also made a $14 billion investment in Juul, which is the vaping technology that all the kids are getting into today. And so they're doing a significant amount of lobbying around this as well because they see marijuana as the new frontier for big tobacco. So we're kind of the David and Goliath scenario, but we're trying to empower people with the data and with the information so that they can speak up and be heard by their representatives.
Let's go to Sandra, who's calling from East Point, Michigan. Sandra, good morning.
Yes, hi. The thing that gets me so upset is that alcohol abuse is worse than anything else, worse than pot, worse than opioids. And it's always healthy people like you who always, you have no idea what people go through. Like the woman that called about her eye problem with her eyes, and with opioids, with the backlash from opioids, people who are suffering from terrible chronic painful diseases that can't be nothing done about, they're being taken off of their pain medication. People are committing suicide because they have no quality of life left because their doctors were scared to give them their pain medication anymore. And it's always people that abuse drugs or abuse these things that make it hard for people who really suffer, because people with chronic pain now are made to suffer because of these people who abuse drugs. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Go ahead, Luke.
Sandra, I think you speak to an important issue that is facing Americans across this country right now. We are in the midst of an opioid epidemic. We are in the midst not just of an opioid epidemic, but my boss, our president, Kevin Sabet, says this is an addiction epidemic. Drugs are kind of ravaging our society right now, be it legal or illegal. We have opioids, we have alcohol, we have tobacco, we have so many other drugs that are fentanyl that are proliferating in our society right now. And a lot of people are hurting, and I hear that in your voice, and I care. And so our organization is trying to make that better. We are asking, look, absolutely, you're right. Alcohol abuse, alcohol is killing more than 100,000 Americans every year. I don't think people know that. Alcohol is responsible for a major body count in this country. So, our regulatory system around alcohol and tobacco is not going well. We don't have it figured out at this point. So to think about layering on another drug on top of tobacco and alcohol, when we're already losing so many lives, I just think it defies comprehension. We cannot allow another drug industry to jump in while the other drug industries are wreaking havoc on our people. The Journal of American Medicine just did a research study that found that in places where the opioid epidemic is the worst, those are actually the places where marijuana is legal. In other words, they are saying that there appears to be an exacerbation of the opioid epidemic in places where marijuana is legal. So I don't want to unleash a new drug on the population that may make things worse when we already have so many drug issues in our country. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I really care, and I want to see us come up with the right solutions from a public health perspective to help with that.
Let's talk to Paul, who's calling from Derry, New Hampshire. Paul, good morning.
Good morning. Hey, I just want to thank Luke for the efforts. I just happened to be getting ready to go outside and do some work, and I just was drawn to this program. The woman from Minnesota that called earlier, who somehow scoffs at the idea that a conservative can actually practice good science, when in fact most of the progressive science is completely permeated with confirmation bias. But that's a different story entirely. My main point is this. As a nation, we spent millions, if not billions of dollars in trying to get rid of cigarette smoking and to educate people as to what the adverse health effects are. It's a great success, I would say. By the same token, I've actually read scientific articles that suggest that marijuana smoke, which is exactly the same as pot smoke, I should say, as cigarette smoke, is retained in the lungs for a much longer period of time. Consequently, you're exposing yourself to the same thing we spent billions of dollars of trying to get rid of in terms of a public health hazard. I just wanted to get a comment on that, if you've heard that before, or if there's any additional work being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I've actually spoken with, and our organization's spoken with, a number of people who have been advocates on the anti-tobacco side for decades, many, many years, and they're coming to us and saying, we feel like with this now push to legalize marijuana, all the gains that we spent decades trying to win against big tobacco are being rolled back. It was all for nothing. Unfortunately, there's so much misinformation being put out by this industry right now. People don't think that secondhand marijuana smoke is the same thing as secondhand tobacco smoke, even though it is. And the American Lung Association tells us that it's just as carcinogenic as tobacco smoke is. So these are the same things, and that the science must prevail. We must listen to public health professionals. We must listen to our scientists. scientists, in the same way that we do with climate change and any other kind of public health issue that our country faces. We have to let science rule the day. So absolutely, from the tobacco front, it is very much like this. And these tobacco companies that we spent a long time kind of putting under wraps and trying to get them out of our political inner workings in D.C. especially, they're now rising again and getting renewed life and renewed profit margins because they're all in on this pot industry. So the push to legalize should be characterized as one that is for profits for big industries. The push to legalize is not about the little people. And it's very important we wake up to that right now before we let Big Tobacco 2.0 happen all over again. I wasn't around for Big Tobacco's rise over the last 100 years and the millions of lives that we had to lose to figure out it was damaging, but I'm around for this fight, and I think it's time that we learned from history in this country and we stop this before it gets out of hand.
Let's talk to Woody, who's calling from Monroe, Michigan. Woody, good morning.
Good morning. Marijuana has been around for about 10,000 years, and if you haven't done the research now, or the government did some research. It's called the Panama Canal Military Investigation into the effects of marijuana. I believe it was 1921 to 1929. Then the LaGuardia Commission, the effects of marijuana, 1939 to 1944. And then the Schaefer Commission on the effects of marijuana, 1971 to 72. And they didn't get the results they wanted. They found out that there was no major harm with marijuana, and so they kind of didn't let the public know about it. And, the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and American Journal of Medicine, Internal Medicine, and the RAND Corporation all did studies, and they found out that marijuana helps people to reduce the amount of opioids they are using. It's not the problem. It could be the solution.
What's your response, Luke?
Yeah, if it was a solution for the opioid epidemic, I would be elated because I think we need to find solutions to the opioid epidemic. Unfortunately, there's no easy button you can just hit to solve that problem. And marijuana certainly is not the easy button. The research we're seeing, I wasn't around for these commissions. I'd have to look into the commissions you're talking about. But all I know is that the American Medical Association, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, the medical societies, I know that, that Journal of Addiction Medicine, that Journal of Psychiatry, that Lancet Journal of Psychiatry, all the major research institutions, public health organizations, and medical associations all say that marijuana is a harmful and addictive substance, and they all oppose the commercialization of this drug. If there are medicinal benefits to this, I absolutely want to see that borne out, and the FDA has already approved a couple of marijuana-based medications for the public that you can get a prescription for, and we support that process through the FDA. So I think it's important that we don't conflate, again, this medical, the medical aspect of marijuana with the recreational aspect. There is no reason why we should legalize and commercialize another drug if we think that maybe it has medical value. Those medical values should be looked at on their own merit by science, not by for-profit industry.
Let's talk to Michael, who's calling from Coral Springs, Florida. Michael, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. I've always been a bit libertarian when it comes to smoking marijuana. I'd rather see someone buy something that's regulated and inspected and healthy rather than going to a criminal and buying a bag of poison. But just what we're going through right now with the opioid thing, it seems to me that when people get involved with a particular drug, they lose their own sense of responsibility. If people could just smoke marijuana, if it doesn't work out for them, they stop smoking it. But look what happened with opioid abuse. People abused the drug that was legal to take, and they're suing. They're suing everybody. They're suing the companies that made it. They're suing the stores that sell it. They're suing the doctors that prescribe it. They're asking the government for a percentage of government expenditures to be spent on them. I'm worried that in 20 years from now, those people who are consuming medical marijuana at will, wherever they want, whenever they want, will lose that sense of self-responsibility and blame the rest of society for whatever ills they get. These ills aren't going to fall on everybody, and it only might be a minority of people. I think the majority of those people that smoke will be responsible, and I don't think it's that bad if they do smoke at night, like having a cocktail or something like that. But we seem to throw our sense of self-responsibility out the window when it comes to opioids.
Go ahead and respond real quick to that, Luke.
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to that question. I want to comment on the libertarian side of this because, from a libertarian perspective, I get it. I think people think, well, you know what, what somebody's going to do in their own home, what business of that is mine? And unfortunately, if that were the case, if it were that simple, I would agree. But anytime you use a drug, and this is for marijuana, this is for any drug, it impacts the society. It impacts other people. Perfect example, if you use marijuana in your own home and you get out and drive and you crash into somebody else's car and kill their child, as we've seen happen so many times, that impacts other people. That's not a libertarian issue, that is a societal issue. So drugs have been proven over the last 2 centuries to not be a libertarian kind of individual rights issue. They've been proven to be a societal issue, which is why our country overwhelmingly supported and adopted the Controlled Substances Act to stop the proliferation of drugs and drug use. So that's the important side of that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we have to throw people in prison, and that's why we should look at alternatives to incarceration. I think that's important. To the other aspect of your question, this self-responsibility and kind of the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of people think, and I'm sure there are people who maybe even will call in and they're going to say, well, you must be funded by Big Pharma, because you want to keep opioids out there but not marijuana. I'm here to tell you we don't take any money from pharma, and actually pharma is invested in the marijuana industry. The former CEO of Purdue Pharma, who brought us OxyContin, who's helped with the opioid epidemic, unfortunately, in the wrong way, he is now the CEO of a marijuana company. So the pharmaceutical industry is totally involved in this, and I think it's great that he drew that comparison in terms of the lawsuits, because all the lawsuits happening with the pharmaceutical industry right now, if we legalize marijuana, in 50 years, it's going to be the same thing for the abuses of the marijuana industry. Do we really want to go down that road where people are losing their lives and their loved ones and they're having to form class action lawsuits to try to get this industry under wraps? I don't think so. I don't think we want to go down that road. So I think it's very important we look to this example, these cases these trials that are going on in Oklahoma, for example, and Insys Therapeutics and Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family, and look at that and say, do we want to replicate that model in 50 years with another drug industry?
We'd like to thank Luke Niforatos of Smart Approaches to Marijuana for being with us here today. Luke, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, Jesse, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and I love your show.
Appreciate it. So everyone we'd like to thank all of our guests today and all of our callers.